So it turns out your school might be monitoring everything you do on your laptop and computer. I'm Jordan, thanks to CuriosityStream for sponsoring this video, and we are back with yet another installment of how AI has infiltrated all of our lives. I'm sure this won't be the last time I talk about this, so subscribe if you're interested in staying up to date. Also, psst, there's bonus content in the Nebula Plus version of this video. At the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of students were introduced to the idea of automated proctoring software, which monitors your every keystroke, the noises in the background of your room, as well as your video in order to determine whether or not you are exhibiting cheating behaviors. And while the backlash against a lot of that software has pushed schools away from using it, it turns out that your school might have actually been monitoring you the entire time anyway. In fairness, the idea of monitoring what students do on their devices isn't exactly new. I definitely remember being mindful of what I was doing on my phone when I was connected to the Wi-Fi that my high school had, but student activity monitoring using machine learning has definitely flourished during the pandemic, whether that be for exams or for just everyday usage of school-issued devices. And if you want to hear more about automated exam proctoring, you can check out the video that I did on it up here, or I'll leave a link in the description. But in short, in the early days of remote learning, there was a lot of concern that students might use the fact that they weren't being observed by a teacher in a classroom as an opportunity to cheat on exams. And because of this, many schools started using automated proctoring software, which required students to essentially allow the software to monitor things like a video feed, the screen of the computer that they were using to see what websites they happened to be going on, or monitor their keystrokes and the noise in the background to make sure they could identify if someone happened to be feeding you answers in the background or something. All of this information would then be fed into a machine learning algorithm, which would flag students who were detected as cheating based on suspicious behaviors. And of course, this comes with a lot of caveats and turns out to be a lot more problematic than it might seem on its face. It later came out that students with darker skin tones were often not recognized by the software, which made it difficult for them to actually take their exams. And there's been a lot of concern that the suspicious activity that these systems are detecting may be biased against neurodivergent students or students who are just nervous. When I made that video, however, I thought that student activity monitoring was limited to exams. I hadn't heard about other ways that schools are using software to monitor their students. That is, until I came across this Fast Company article on how schools are using a program called Gaggle to monitor students' mental health. Unlike automated proctoring, this kind of monitoring introduces a bit of a tension between the privacy of the students themselves and the potential benefits of getting students access to mental health treatment if they need it, especially when you consider that invading a student's privacy may make them less likely to seek help in the first place. Gaggle seems to be one of the main companies behind this kind of software, and after a quick spin through their website, you can see why, at least at first glance, there might be some compelling reasons to use it. One of the things that really jumped out to me on their website is this graph that I'm showing here that essentially shows a significant increase in potentially concerning behaviors or incidences across the past year of education. So this is for kids who were essentially doing things during the pandemic. As you can see, there's no actual y-axis on here, which is a great way to show that something significant has happened without actually showing that something significant has happened. So we don't know how much of a change there is between 2019, 2020, and 2020 and 21. On top of that, and as the Fast Company article points out, the way that Gaggle essentially measures incidents actually ends up catching a lot of course materials or otherwise non-representative things that are identified as potentially negative content, things that should be flagged for mental health reasons, when it isn't something that really reflects on the student. It might be a workbook for a health class about mental health. So if we go through what Gaggle actually does, one of the big things that they seem to do is essentially use machine learning to flag concerning content in student school-issued accounts. So you can do this either by having school-issued laptops, if your school does that, or if your school uses something like Gmail in order to manage everyone's school emails, then they can also do content analysis via that. And you can actually see here all of the different things that they review for Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, and Canvas. So if you send anything via your email or if you send any messages via Canvas, they would be able to see all of that. The software also offers a tip line for students to essentially anonymously report concerning behavior that they've seen, as well as teletherapy options so that students who need mental health treatment can get access to that more easily than they might be able to through their actual school. So all in all, this really paints a picture of a software that can only help students and really has no downsides. Unsurprisingly, it turns out it's a little bit more complicated than that. In fact, a report from the Center for Democracy and Technology on the privacy implications of student activity monitoring software found that wealthier students often actually had more privacy than students from lower income areas because they were able to purchase their own personal devices that were not part of this software. And if you take things like the broadband gap in the United States into account, where lower income households may not have reliable access to internet except through things like school-issued hotspots, this essentially implies that poorer students are under increased surveillance compared to their wealthier peers. Both the Fast Company article and the Center for Democracy and Technology report include interviews with parents, school administrators, and teachers on the trade-offs of using this kind of software. And while most of them do acknowledge that this is a bit of a violation of student privacy, especially because the actual data that the software is recording is often not explained to students or families who are using it because they're worried that they won't be able to communicate it properly, most of the interviewees end up concluding that if a system like this is able to save one student's life, then the trade-off is effectively worth it. I have very mixed feelings on this perspective, largely because it feels like it's posed as a zero-sum game where we either use this software or we put students' lives at risks, and I don't think that's actually the case. As someone who has been a student, who is currently a student, granted in a different capacity than K through 12 students are, there are definitely other options that would allow students to have more access to mental health resources and identify students in need earlier that also don't necessarily infringe on student privacy as much. Unsurprisingly, however, there are actually no student perspectives in any of these interviews. In short, this feels like another example, at least to me, of technology being used to attempt to solve a problem that could probably be better solved by having better social systems of support for people and by increasing trust between students and schools. And that isn't to say that there isn't a place for technology within that, but the all-or-nothing reliance on technology, I think, creates a false dichotomy that isn't really there, especially if you consider how much schools are spending on this software. I do think it'll be interesting to see how this type of student activity monitoring software evolves as students go back to in-person learning. My initial inclination would be to think that students wouldn't be under as much surveillance in this way because you don't have to be remote all the time, but I'm sure people will find a way to continue using this software anyway, or something similar to it. And this is all without even getting into the challenges of identifying or diagnosing mental health conditions using algorithms. Unsurprisingly, it turns out that the science behind using AI to diagnose mental health conditions isn't particularly straightforward, which I get into more in the Nebula Plus version of this video. If you haven't heard, Nebula is a streaming platform built by me and some of my friends, including people like Tirzu, Simon Clark, and Medlife Crisis. On Nebula, you can find ad-free versions of all of our videos, extended versions of our videos, and bonus content that we can post without worrying about how well it will perform on YouTube. You'd also get access to our Nebula originals, which you can't find anywhere else, including Tom Scott's game show Money or a very good trivia show where I won $500 for drawing a very nice circle. And the best way to sign up for Nebula is actually through CuriosityStream, who are kindly sponsoring today's video. CuriosityStream is a subscription streaming service with thousands of documentaries and nonfiction videos. In fact, if you're interested in learning more about the science behind mental health, I'd highly recommend checking out their documentary, The Sad People Factory, which dives into the complicated nature of depression at both the individual and global level. CuriosityStream loves independent creators and wants to help us grow our platform, so if you click on the link in the description or use my promo code Jordan, you can get access to CuriosityStream for 26% off their annual plans, with Nebula included for free for as long as you are a CuriosityStream member. That's less than $15 a year. So whether you want to learn more about the science behind using AI to diagnose mental health conditions, or you want to check out some of the awesome documentaries on CuriosityStream, you can sign up for CuriosityStream and Nebula at curiositystream.com/Jordan or using the promo code Jordan. You can also check out the video that I did on AI and mental health earlier this year up here. You can follow me on all of my socials down here, and I will see y'all on Monday. Bye.